I want you to hold two words in your head. Eastern Cape Judge President Selby Mbenenge just avoided impeachment for now. A judicial tribunal concluded he is not guilty of gross misconduct. But before you think this is a total acquittal, wait. Because the nuance of this verdict is precisely what has South Africa divided. Hit like right now. And subscribe, because this case raises deep questions about power, hierarchy, and what really constitutes sexual harassment in the workplace. In a report dated 21st January 2026 and reported publicly on 31st January 2026, the tribunal issued its findings. Selby Mbenenge, not guilty of gross misconduct, not guilty of sexual harassment, not guilty of gross incompetence or incapacity under Section 177 of the Constitution.
On whether the Judicial Service Commission believes that this sanction is the correct one, or they could possibly upgrade it if they feel that the recommendation that has been made, or this lesser sanction, does not suit this particular case. Am I correct to say so?
Yes. I think the thing with this decision is that a lot of the findings hinge on the credibility of the complainant, and the findings throughout the decision are that in a number of different instances the tribunal finds that she has lied, and credibility findings are difficult to challenge. There's certainly also findings about what exactly the legal position is where there are two people of very different rank, and what constitutes sexual harassment in those circumstances. And the tribunal have been careful to cite those decisions and distinguish this case from those. So it's a very carefully worded decision, and will be difficult to challenge. Although, as you say, it doesn't mean that the JSC is bound by the terms of it.
Yeah, but what factors, Alison, would the JSC likely consider when having to decide whether to uphold, the tribunal's recommendation or believe that there could be a heavier sanction?
Well, I think if we go back to Judge Matata, in that situation, the finding was in fact not of gross misconduct by the JSC, but when it went on appeal to the SCA, they then found that it was gross misconduct. So that was an example of where there's a lesser finding, and then the finding is overturned.
Of where there's a lesser finding, and then the finding is overturned. That means he avoids the direct path to impeachment, the constitutional process that could have removed him permanently from office. But here's the critical twist that all media outlets are emphasizing. He was found guilty. Guilty of misconduct, a lesser offense, a violation of Article 5.1 of the Code of Judicial Conduct. What's the difference? A finding of gross misconduct can trigger the Section 177 removal process, involving the JSC and then Parliament. Misconduct is a lower-level finding, and the JSC decides the sanction. Let's rewind. January 23, 2023. Ndiswa Mengo, a court secretary at the Eastern Cape High Court in Makhanda, files a formal complaint. Judge President Selby Mbenenge, the head of her division, according to her, sexually harassed her.
You had the courage to say what you wanted to say, is that correct?
Ngoku ke ude wabanaso isibindi sokwazi ukuyitsho lento ubufuna ukuyitsho okanye lento ubufuna ukuyithetha.
Injalo.
That is correct.
Did the conversation stop after you said no?
Incoko ke iye yabe iyaphela emveni koba wena uthe hayi.
Khange phele.
It didn't stop.
It didn't end there, with the tribunal hearing further evidence that the top judge allegedly sent a text asking Mbenenge to send him a sexually explicit image.
Private part. He was referring to my private part.
Did you respond to that?
Uphendulile ke wena kuloo nto? No, I did not.
As the line of questioning continued, the impact of sexual harassment on the judge's secretary, allegedly at the hands of the judge president, was laid bare before the tribunal. Mbenenge, who has previously testified that the alleged harassment was dehumanizing and stripped her of her dignity, broke down in tears when probed on her quote-unquote Jesus response to a sexually explicit text during that leg of the exchanges.
That response of mine, I had given it to a message of a private part that he had sent.
May we adjourn for a few minutes, Chair?
She's asking for adjournment for a few minutes.
Mbenenge, who denies sending the sexually explicit texts, is a senior judge within South Africa's judiciary and occupies the most senior position within the Eastern Cape Division of the High Court, where Mbenenge, a junior professional, occupied a role as a judge's secretary. The tribunal continues. Kani Mapanga, SABC News, Johannesburg.
What did Mbenenge allege? Inappropriate WhatsApp messages, explicit content, unwanted advances, an incident in his office where she alleged Mbenenge exposed himself physically. Mbenenge described the messages as jocular, flirtatious, and even salacious. She alleged they were unwelcome. She alleged the workplace hierarchy made it impossible to say no without risking her employment. And here's where this story becomes complex. Because Mbenenge admitted to sending messages, but he insisted the interaction was consensual. He insisted Mbenenge actively participated. During the tribunal, Mbenenge's defense, led by advocate Muzi Sikakane SC, built a strategic argument. The messages were consensual. Mbenenge responded with her own flirtatious messages. Mbenenge sent laughing emojis. Mbenenge asked when Mbenenge deleted messages before she could read them, indicating active interest.
When she filed the complaint against Mbenenge in December 2022,
what happened was that
Kutlwano Moretlwa from the Office of the Chief Justice testified that she assisted Mbenenge in compiling the initial complaint against Mbenenge. She told the inquiry that Mbenenge cried as she recounted the allegations.
she then started to narrate as to what transpired. And then as she was narrating the events, she started getting emotional. And then she would cry. And then we will stop, I will comfort her, and then, try for, she would then for her to get her composure so that we can continue.
Moretlwa will continue her testimony on Thursday. The inquiry is set down until the end of next week. For Newsroom Africa on Channel 405, I am Kwanita Hunter in Sandton.
And here's where Mbenge's case began to fall apart. Under cross-examination, Mbenenge admitted something critical. The tribunal found her complaint left out some of her own messages, which damaged her credibility. Messages she herself had sent. Salacious messages showing active participation. The tribunal report described the complainant as having lied on key points and said this did serious damage to her case. Hit like if you think this nuance matters in workplace harassment cases. But the tribunal didn't leave it there. Although it concluded there was no gross misconduct, it did find misconduct. Why? Because Mbenenge, as judge president, initiated and conducted a flirtatious relationship with a subordinate in the workplace, during work hours, through WhatsApp. Article 5.1 of the Code of Judicial Conduct states, "A judge must always, and not only in the discharge of official duties, act honorably, and in a manner befitting judicial office. The tribunal concluded that Mbenenge's conduct was prejudicial to the effective and expeditious administration of the business of the court. It was inappropriate. It was a violation of professional conduct. But it didn't reach the constitutional threshold for gross misconduct. Why not? Because most messages were outside work hours. Because the tribunal concluded Mbenenge had reasonable belief. The messages were welcome. Because both parties were adults. Because both agreed to delete messages, indicating intent for privacy. Mbenenge also alleged a physical incident in Mbenenge's office. She alleged he made inappropriate remarks and exposed himself. Mbenenge vehemently denied it. The tribunal found there was no credible evidence to support this allegation. Why? Zintle Nkayi, Mbenenge's former secretary, testified she was in her office at that time. She would have seen Mbenenge enter. The visitor's laptop register showed Mbenenge left before Nkayi that day. CCTV footage didn't show Mbenenge entering Mbenenge's office on the alleged date. Tracker report of Mbenenge's vehicle showed he left court at noon, making the alleged afternoon incident impossible. Mbenenge also alleged Mbenenge sent her explicit photos. The tribunal found there was no evidence those specific photos had been sent by Mbenenge, and here's where this verdict becomes polarizing. Judges Matter, a judicial watchdog organization, issued a stark warning. His lawyer alleges perjury, but that is an allegation and separate from the tribunal's misconduct finding.
Private between them, and one of them decided I'm not so sure, to ingratiate herself in the limelight, and it has been found that she had embellished her claims, she had committed perjury. I know that's not part of your question. I need to mention that Judge President Mbenenge had lodged a criminal complaint of criminal injury against Ms. Mbenenge, and the judge has found that in the ruling that she has committed perjury, and that will be pursued by the judge. So this is a highly unfortunate incident. However, it's not the end of it. It's got its own life, but it's the end for Judge President Mbenenge, who is continuing with his life and to come and resume with his sterling career as the Judge President of the Eastern Cape High Court. And by the way, it has been besieged with challenges since he's in and he's going back.
All right. Thabo Kwinana, thank you so much for joining us this morning. That's the Judge President Mbenenge's lawyer speaking there and reacting.
According to Alison Tilley, coordinator of Judges Matter, whether or not you can find the power differential, her refusals can be read not as refusals. The tribunal rejected the concept of power differential, the idea that workplace hierarchy affects a subordinate person's ability to say no. Tilley warns this verdict could have a chilling effect. It could discourage future complaints. It could send the message that if you respond in any way to your superior, even under implicit pressure, you lose your right to allege harassment. Is that the right standard? Or is that the inevitable result when someone omits key evidence and lies under oath? Social media exploded. South Africa is deeply divided. Some celebrate. Advocate Muzi Sikhakhane SC fought a good fight for JP Mbenenge. This is what having a good lawyer does, victory. Others denounce, this is unfortunate. This is why gender-based violence will not end in this country. Mbenenge abused Andizwa using his position. This is a miscarriage of justice.
The instances in which the Judge President sent explicit photos to the junior staffer. I think an important part of the report as well is that it says that it is not to be deduced that simply because Andiswa Mbenenge is a woman as well as a junior staffer, where those power dynamics did take place, that she was at a disadvantage, and that in fact those particular messages from the judge president, in which there was an exchange between Andiswa Mengo and the judge president, were not in fact unwanted. You remember, Katlego, that was the purpose of this particular Judicial Conduct Tribunal, to establish whether there was sexual harassment and whether those messages, the exchange of messages between the judge president as well as the junior staffer, were unwanted, thereby constituting sexual harassment.
Who's right? That's the question that defines this case. Because the tribunal's verdict isn't the end. Now the report goes to the Judicial Service Commission. The JSC must decide, do they accept the tribunal's findings or do they reject them? What sanction do they impose for the misconduct? If the JSC accepts the report, it can impose sanctions like a warning, reprimand, counseling, or pay consequences. If it rejects the report, the pathway can shift. And Mbenenge has options too. Her legal team, the Women's Legal Center, stated they retain the right to take the tribunal's findings for judicial review. They can appeal. They can argue the tribunal made a legal error in rejecting the power differential concept. Let's talk about the implications. For Mbenenge, he avoided impeachment. He avoided permanent removal. He maintains his position as judge president for now, but he faces sanction for misconduct. His reputation is tarnished. For Mbenenge, the tribunal found she lied. Her credibility was destroyed. But the tribunal did recognize Mbenenge's conduct was inappropriate, and she has the right to appeal. For the judicial system, this case raises questions about how to handle relationships in workplace hierarchies, about what constitutes consent when there's a power differential, about what evidence is sufficient to sustain harassment allegations. For society, does this verdict protect harassment victims, or does it appropriately punish those who make false allegations? Can it be both? Chief Justice Mandisa Maya implemented a sexual harassment policy for the judiciary in August 2025, a zero-tolerance policy toward abuse of power. But Judges Matter warns, the policy developments are positive but insufficient without consistent application. And this case will be the test. Will the policy change how future cases are handled, or will standards remain the same? I want you to go to the comments right now and share your perspective. Do you think the tribunal reached the correct decision, or was the rejection of power differential a legal error? Do you think Mbenenge's lying completely destroys her case, or should the fact that Mbenenge initiated a flirtatious relationship with a subordinate have resulted in a more severe finding? And what sanction do you think the JSC should impose? Because this story doesn't end with the tribunal's verdict. This story continues with the JSC, and it could continue with appeals. Subscribe. Hit like for more Mzansi Breakdown.